Today we're going to talk about what I think is a fascinating topic and a topic that is incredibly important. Now, a lot of people have talked to me about what I think is my favorite competency, and I have to admit, I've never met a competency I didn't like. But there is one that, as we've looked at the data and the research and we've gone through them, seems to be the most unique competency and the highest impact. And that is the ability to inspire and motivate others. And my goal today in this webinar is for you to have some involvement in this such that you'll not just passively look at it, but that you'll actively look at it and try to find a developmental opportunity for you around this whole issue. So let's start by thinking about inspiring. Several years ago, I have two daughters, and I asked them, what do leaders do? And my daughters collectively looked at me and said, well, leaders are the boss, one of them said. And then the other one said, yeah, they tell people what to do. They give orders. And I said, well, how did you come up with that? And they looked at me and they said, from you. You're always telling us you're the boss. And it's true that one of the things that leaders tend to do is they push. And if you're thinking about how to get higher performance out of people, one way to do that is to push. And we call that competency drive for results. Now, it's a very useful behavior. When people give me a deadline, amazing things happen. I start to behave differently. I start to act differently. When people tell me I have to be somewhere at a specific time and be prepared with specific outcomes, it really affects me. And what we've seen is that leaders who are good at pushing get better results. That's a true thing. Now, if one way of getting more performance or higher performance out of people is to push, what's the other way? Well, it's pull. And again, that competency is the ability to inspire and motivate others. So push is sort of being demanding and setting deadlines and telling people you need to do this, you need to do that. Pull is getting people passionate, excited, getting them invested, having that personal desire to make things happen. Now, we did an interesting study where we looked at the relationship between those two competencies, push and pull. And we wondered which had the most impact. Was it inspiring and motivating or drives for results? So we looked at leaders who were at or above the 75th percentile on inspiring, but below that on driving for results. And then we looked at the best leaders, those in the top 10%, those that were extraordinary leaders. And we found that there were 10% of those extraordinary leaders that were good at inspiring, but not so good at drive for results. So what we think is there's a 10% probability that you could be an extraordinary leader if you were pretty good at inspiring, but not so good at driving for results. So then we looked at the opposite combination, good at drives for results, not so good at inspiring. Now, ask you the question here. In your organization, which of those two are people better at? Are they better at inspiring or they're better at pushing? Now, in 90% of the organizations that are our clients, the answer is B. It's driving for results. And everybody's really clear about that. And so I usually ask people when we're showing them this data, so do you think the number is higher or lower here? Do you think that if people are good at driving for results but not good at inspiring, is this going to be a higher percentage or a lower percentage? And most say higher, but then we show them the data. And it turns out that if you're good at drives for results but not inspiring, when we looked at the best leaders, there was only a 5% chance that you'd be a great leader overall. When I see that, I'm reminded of that movie, that amazing cinematic piece of art, Dumb and Dumber. I don't know if you've ever seen this movie, but it's kind of a strange movie. It's not a great movie, but there's this funny line in the movie where Jim Carrey is attracted to this woman, and she says, "What's the chances that a guy like me and a girl like you fall in love and get married and have babies?" And she says, "I'd say about 1 in 1,000,000." And when he hears that, he gets really excited and starts to smile, and he looks at her, and then he says, "Ah, so you're saying there's a chance?" Well, yeah. If you're good at drives for results, but not inspiring, there's a chance you can be a great leader. It's 5%. Okay? Now, the interesting thing is, wonder if you're good at both of these. Wonder if you're very inspirational, again, 75th percentile or higher, and you're good at drive for results, 75th percentile or higher. You'd expect 15%, but you get much more than that. You actually get 85%. So 85% of the great leaders were good at both A and B. We're good at inspiring, but also at driving. Now, there's a great moral to this story here, and I think it's an important implication here. A lot of times when people hear about inspiration, I think the message they hear is, hey, you need to stop pushing and start pulling. But that's not the message we have. We think that drive for results is a great quality and an excellent competency, and people that do it well gain ground. They get more productivity, they get higher performance. So keep pushing, but, well, start pulling. And it's the combination of those two competencies that really create greatness in leaders. Now, we have a study to show you a little bit more about this, but I'd like to introduce this study by talking about a quote from Peter Drucker. Several years ago, before Peter Drucker died, he said, "A 10% increase in productivity would double the profits of most organizations." Now, when I first heard that, I thought, that can't be. That's a very small increase in productivity. How would that double the profits of the company? Well, my simple-minded way to think about this is, let's say you have 10 employees. You increase productivity of those 10 employees by 10%. What does that give you? What it gives you is one free employee that you pay nothing to, that takes no vacation, that they don't use any office space. You see, most organizations, the largest cost factor in that organization is people. And when you think about a small increase in productivity, what happens is that the value of that, the productivity there, all that value goes right to the bottom line. Now, as an introduction to that, we did a study where we looked at the effects of results versus inspiration on what we call discretionary effort. Discretionary effort is that effort that people are willing to put into their job. Now, when people come to work and their attitude is, I'll do the minimum amount possible to keep my job, that's zero discretionary effort. When they say, I'll do a little bit more than that, there's some discretionary effort. When they're willing to give you 110%, when they're willing to go above and beyond, go the extra mile, that's a whole bunch of discretionary effort. And we did a study where we looked at the percentage of employees who were highly committed. They were willing to go the extra mile. And for those who were not good, not at the 75th percentile on either results or inspiration, we found that they had 25% of their employees that worked for them that were willing to give discretionary effort. In other words, 1 out of 4 employees were willing to go the extra mile. Now, when you're in that team and there's 1 of you out of 4, you're a minority. And if you do go the extra mile, oftentimes people will criticize that. So what happens if a leader is really good at 75th percentile or higher at drive for results but not inspires? Well, the percentage of highly committed employees goes from 25% to 40%. And if you're good at inspiring, it even gets higher. That goes to 45%. Again, this is getting close to the 50% mark, but here's where the powerful combination occurs again. If you're good at both, if you're both inspiring and driven for results, that powerful combination gets people to the 63% of your employees being willing to give you 120%. And when you go over that 50% mark, that's the majority of your employees who are willing to really give you that kind of discretionary effort. Now, that is going to have an impact on the bottom line. If you think about what would happen if instead of 25% of your employees giving you extra effort, if you had 63% of your employees giving you 120% of their effort, that translates into higher productivity, higher morale, ability to get projects done. So what we did early on when we started to gather all this data about our 16 differentiating competencies is we started to do a few tests to look at the difference between the competencies. And we wondered which of the competencies, if we compared the best leaders to the worst leaders, would come out as being the most differentiating. And then we compared the best leaders against the average leaders, which one would be most differentiating. When we looked at the impact on employee commitment, which one would be number one. And when we looked at what direct reports selected as the most important competency, which one would be number one. And when we did those 4 tests and those analytics, they all led to the same answer. The number one competency, the competency that was most important, was inspires and motivates others. And there was tremendous effect, there was a tremendous impact from inspiration. When we looked at just that one competency, inspiring others, and we looked at your effectiveness on that, and then we looked at employee engagement, what we found is, and this is a study of over 40,000 leaders, if you were in the bottom 10% on your ability to inspire, employee engagement was at the 24th percentile. If you were in the top 10%, engagement was at the 79th percentile. So there's a tremendous correlation between the engagement of employees and your ability to inspire. Now, so what if people are expired, and so what if they're engaged and they love their job and they think this is a great place to work? The place that they've found, and we've seen this over and over again, that has a great impact is in retail. 50 years ago, Sears did this study where they looked at the correlation between engagement of employees, customer satisfaction, and store revenues. 50 years ago, what they found is that if you could increase employee engagement by 5 points, that drove up customer satisfaction by 1.3%, which drove up revenues by 0.5%, or $250 million per year. Now, what we're finding in this study is that the number one factor affecting the engagement of employees, the number one competency, is this ability to inspire and motivate others. Now, this old study from Sears, it's been replicated hundreds and hundreds of times in every industry. And it keeps getting replicated and to the point now where hundreds of different studies have done in hospitals and retail and across the world to find that, that is true, that employee satisfaction does affect customer satisfaction, and that does affect revenues and profits and growth. And what we're adding to that is this idea that inspiration is the number one competency that affects satisfaction. If you looked at the percentage of highly committed employees, this whole issue of discretionary effort, again, that's another study. This is 40,000 leaders, and you can see how the more inspiring you are, the higher the percentage of highly committed employees, the higher the percentage of more discretionary effort in your organization. And then if you look at the percentage of employees that think about quitting, turnover is a huge issue. The problem with turnover is you lose your best employees. People that work for an uninspiring leader, 47% of them think about quitting. For the most inspiring leaders, only about 13% think about quitting. So what we find is that being inspiring and motivating really has a dramatic effect on engagement, percentage of highly committed employees, the intention to leave the organization, and that leads to increased profits, increased productivity, and the ability to retain your best talent. What we've just done is created a business case for why inspiration is so important. We believe that this one specific competency can have a profound effect on your organization. Now I'm going to show you some of the most fascinating data we've ever collected. And when we looked at these 16 competencies across 52,000 leaders, and we said, which competency are most leaders great at? And this is a global study. And which one are they least effective at? We found that they were most effective at displaying integrity and honesty and takes initiative and technical expertise and results. Those were the top 4. But what was at the bottom? What was the worst competency? What competency was rated the lowest across the globe? Number 16, you know, it was the ability to inspire and motivate others. This is a rare quality. It is as a mineral, it's the most valued mineral, if you will, because it's the rarest quality in the world. We also ask people to tell us which competency was most important. We listed all 16, and they got to vote for the top 4, the 4 that they think would make the most difference in their ability to be successful in their current job. Well, I bet you've guessed what happened here. Guess what's number 1? You've got it, the ability to inspire and motivate others. Do you find this interesting? That the least effective quality is the most important thing. And the groups that rated as most important were the direct reports, and get this, the individual managers themselves. They agreed that it was the most important competency. So the question comes up here, why aren't more leaders inspiring? What's so hard about this? Why is this so difficult? And why is there such a lack of inspiration in the world? Well, a lot of this comes because people really don't know what to do. Their intuitive sense about inspiration is people know inspiring other people that are inspiring. They look at them, they watch them, and then they try to mimic them. And so when people intuitively try to be more inspiring, they start by being more perky and positive, or they give pep talks, or they go around the office and try to high five their employees. Now, I've looked at this. I've tried this. Guess what? It doesn't work. I mean, these things might work a little bit and occasionally, but consistently, this doesn't create inspiration. So the problem with why there are not more inspiring leaders is people don't know what to do. To solve this problem, we looked at data from 183,000 assessments of 14,000 leaders. What we did is we looked at those leaders, and we looked at those who were most inspirational, most motivating, and those who were unmotivating and uninspirational. And what we dug out of that data were what we called companion behaviors. Now, this is the how part. This is how leaders were more inspiring. What we found were 10 competency companions. These are behaviors that inspiring leaders did. And what we found is if you engage in these behaviors, this is the secret. This is what makes you more inspiring. And uncovering this secret has helped us to teach leaders how to become more inspiring. We do not think this is a genetic quality. We do not think you're born inspiring or uninspiring. What we do think are there's 10 behaviors that really leverage this ability to inspire. My challenge to you today is to go through, to look at these 10 behaviors, and for you to identify one that would help you to be more inspiring, and then think about what you could do to develop this quality. So let's talk about these 10 behaviors. The first companion behavior is called making the emotional connection. Now, as you look at this slide, it looks like some genetic research or something like that. And what it actually is a social network. It's a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend. And the squares are men, the circle are women. And the shading represents the extent to which you're happy, light color, or sad, a dark color. Now, as you stand back and look at this, do you notice the patterns? Do you know the cluster, and do you notice the clustering of the dark cells and the white? And do you notice how they cluster together? What the research found is that if you have a friend that is happy, the probability that you'll be more happy goes up by 25%. There's also something called the 3 degrees of separation. So let's suppose that you have a friend and they have a friend. Now, you don't know the friend of the friend, but the friend of the friend is happy, which makes your friend happy, which actually affects your happiness. Your happiness could even be affected by somebody you don't even know. What this study teaches us is that emotions are contagious. Now, I used to think it didn't matter, what kind of emotional state I brought to work. If I was ticked off and frustrated, it didn't matter. It was my business. But it turns out that your emotions are more contagious than the flu. They spread. A few years ago, I went into an office to have a meeting with a senior executive. And we met for a while, the group, before the meeting to get ready for the meeting. And at 9 o'clock, there was a knock on the door, and somebody said, "The meeting's been canceled." And I said, "Why?" And they said, "It's not a good day." And I said, "How do you know?" And they said, you ready for this? Everybody knows. You see, emotions are contagious. People know what kind of a mood you're in. And if you're in a frustrated, grumpy, angry mood, that spreads. If you're in an optimistic, positive, and enabling mood, that spreads. And if your friend's emotions make you happy, how much more do the emotions of a boss affect the inspiration and the ability of a group to get their job done? So the first companion behavior you can work on is creating a positive emotional connection at work and bringing your positive emotions to work every day, and then making positive connections with your employees. The second one is establishing stretch goals. Now, I find that people are very confused about stretch goals because most people feel a little bit negative, that stretch goals really are a downer, they're a negative thing. But I'd like to tell you a story about somebody who used them in a different way. A woman by the name of Sherry Dew was having an end-of-the-year meeting. Now, Sherry Dew was the CEO of a regional publisher, and they'd been publishing books for 50 years, and in 50 years, they'd never had a best-selling book. But at the end of this year meeting, Sherry Dew decided to ask her group, does anybody have a goal for the next year? And one of her direct reports raised his hand and he said, "I think we ought to have a best-selling book." Well, Sherry thought to herself, well, that's impossible. We've been in business 50 years. We've never had a best-selling book. But she said, being a good CEO, well, what do the rest of you think? And they talked about it for a few minutes, and after a few minutes, they made a decision. And their decision was, hey, let's have 2 best-selling books next year. Well, she was really kind of blown away by that, but she said, great, and the meeting ended. Now, there was no plan. nobody discussed how. They just set this goal. Let's have 2 best-selling books. Well, the next morning, she said, what was amazing was that little seed was planted. That night it grew. It was like the beanstalk. I mean, good grief. The next morning, people showed up with ideas, and they were just bubbling about these different ideas. And over the next week, a plan was hatched. It was executed, and at the end of the year, they have 2 best-selling books. Why? Because they set a stretch goal. Now, I know that some people feel negative about stretch goals, but if you think about a time when you'd accomplished some significant things at work, a time when you'd done something that was out of the ordinary, and then ask yourself, how was my engagement? How was my satisfaction? How was I feeling about myself? I believe that people want to make a difference. I believe that people want to do something that's out of the ordinary. Now, if you ask them, do you want to work real hard and kill yourself? No, they don't. But if you find a way to get them to set a goal that's difficult, when they achieve that, that's inspiring. Another way to be an inspiring leader is clear vision and direction. Several years ago, I went on a hike with a bunch of Boy Scouts. We did this hike in Utah. We started at 8,000 feet elevation, and we hiked to 14,500 feet, to the highest peak in Utah. And it took us about 4 days. It was a really difficult hike. Now, I don't know if you've ever been on a long hike, but I'd like to show you a picture of what I looked at for the majority of the hike. And it's my foot. It's a funny thing that happens when you go on a hike. You put your thumbs under the back, the straps, and you look down at your feet, and you'll spend hours looking at your feet. There's a good reason, because there's rocks in the trail and roots, and you could trip, and with a backpack, that would really hurt you. But it's amazing how much time you spend looking at your feet. A friend of mine was a mountain hiker, and he said, I spent 8 hours a day looking at my feet and 10 minutes looking at the vista. You know, when I go into organizations and I look at people walking around, do you know what they're looking at? They're looking at their feet. They're thinking about their to-do list. They're thinking about the emails. They're thinking about the things they've got to get done that day. What are they not looking at? They're not looking at that vista. They're not looking at that goal, that objective, that mission, that vision, that strategy. Listen, what we found in our research is that inspiring leaders find a way every day to get people to think about, why are we here? What are we doing? What's the vision? How do we help make people have a better life and create value for people? Now, a lot of people say, well, I do that once a year. Is that enough? Once a month? Is that enough? A few years ago, I went to a meeting with a colleague. We were talking to the CEO about turnover. And as we were walking into the meeting, my colleague said, you watch. He'll talk about the mission, the vision. I said, we're talking about turnover. Well, we went into the meeting. The meeting went on. About 10 minutes into the meeting, guess what the CEO is talking about? The vision. He always talks about the vision, but he connects it. People hear it. They keep people focused on where you're headed. As an inspiring leader, if you can keep people focused on that vision, where you're headed, why that's important, and how you're going to make a difference in the lives of people, that's inspiring. Another way to be an inspiring leader is to communicate powerfully. Now, when I think about communication and I think about people, who on this call communicates too much? Who on this call overshares information, tells people too much information, lets people know too soon what's going on? Well, the problem is most of us just don't keep others informed. We don't let people know what's going on. We hold information to ourselves. And if leaders will share more information and will do it in an inspiring way, that's a great way to become more inspiring. Keep people informed, let them know what's going on, and do it in an inspiring way. Another way to be an inspiring leader is to develop others. Think about somebody who's helped you develop, somebody who's helped you learn a new skill or become better at something. How do you feel about that person? I think about a leader that helped me a lot. Gene Dalton was a good friend of mine, but he took me under his wing. Whenever I talk about Gene, I smile. Look, if you go to a job every day and you work real hard and every 2 weeks you get a paycheck, that's a job. But if you go to a job every day and every 2 weeks you get a paycheck, but you learn something new, that's a career. And when people learn something, that's inspiring. If you want to be an inspiring leader, find out what people want to develop. Find out a skill. And even if people don't want to develop a skill, if you actually can help them develop a new skill, it's inspiring. Even if they don't want it, they find that it's part of their resume. They get to keep that for a lifetime. The money you pay them, it's gone in a week or so. Another way to be an inspiring leader is to be collaborative and a good team player. Now, a bunch of years ago, one of my kids came to me and he said, "Dad, I'll be a better boy if we get a dog." Well, we got the dog. We're still waiting on the kid. Anyway, I'd never had a dog. We'd never had a dog before. What I visualized was that I would go on walks and this dog would be prancing by my side. I visualized going to the park and throwing the Frisbee. He chases it, brings it back. I visualized us in the living room at night watching TV, curled up at my feet. Well, we ended up getting a Siberian Husky. And none of that happens with a Husky. I mean, if you go on a walk with a Husky, whatever speed you go at, that dog will go faster. He drags you. If you go to the park and throw a Frisbee, he'll go chase it. He picks it up, shakes it at you, and then runs away. If you put him in the house at night, he chews on the furniture. I couldn't control this dog. I couldn't manage him. I didn't know how to work with him at all. He didn't seem to be able to control him in any way until we put Kessler in a dog sled team. Now, if you look at that picture that's up on the screen, you'll see Kessler there. He's on the left side of your screen. But you'll also see this guy on the sled in the green coat. That's me. I am smiling. My dog's a genius. He can pull a sled 20 miles, and he loves it. And through the years, and by the way, here's a picture of Kessler this year. He was the lead dog. He used to kind of get off on the trail and go in different ways, and now he's the lead dog, and you can see him right in the front there. Have you ever been on a great team? Have you ever been a team where you love to be there, where your performance went up because that team's performance was so high, where it was great to come to work? Have you ever been on that kind of a team? You ever been on a team from hell? It was hard to come to work, where people were grousing each other, where you just didn't like what you were doing. You know the difference. And if you can create that kind of team, that team where you love being there, that is inspiring. And that's another way you can be an inspiring leader. Another characteristic of inspiring leaders is they were good at fostering innovation. There's this lovely story about the mayor of Bogota, Colombia. His name was Antonio Smokes. And he was a mathematics professor, and he decided to go into politics. He was very unusual, but he ran into this traffic issues, these traffic problems where people were jaywalking and not walking, and they were discourteous. So you're the mayor. You have a traffic problem. How do you solve the problem? Well, if you're like most people, they have more laws, penalties, fines, those kind of things. What does Mayor Mokus do? This is an unusual solution. He hires 420 mimes. Now, he could actually only find 20 mimes in Bogota. And again, this is a good suggestion for unemployed actors. But he found 20 mimes in Bogota, and they trained 400 others, mimes, and they would mock people on the streets for misbehaving. Well, this is definitely a very unusual solution, very innovative. It had a dramatic effect. What we found is that at work, you always know how to solve the problem the same way you solved the problem last time. Well, finding innovative solutions can be inspiring, and it can create a lot more motivation for others. Another characteristic of inspiring leaders is they took initiative. A good example of that, it takes the majority of the fuel in a rocket ship to just get off the landing pad. And you know what? It takes the majority of effort for people when they're trying to be more inspiring just to get started. I mean, you're sitting back listening to this webinar today, you're nodding your head, you might even be enjoying it. But nothing's going to happen until you take the initiative and do something. And so often people wait for just the right moment, just the right occasion, this opportunity for them to be inspiring. You need to grab the gauntlet and go with it. Taking initiative can help you be more inspiring. The next one is champion change. I love this story of how to catch monkeys. What you do is you get a small pot with a very narrow end to the pot, narrow enough that a monkey can stick its hand in, and then you put rice inside the pot. What will happen is the monkey will reach in, grab the rice, and clench its fist. Now, there's just enough room for the monkey to get his hand in the pot, but with the fist clenched, it can't get it out of the pot. And if they chain that pot to the ground, they can catch monkeys, because even when people are approaching, the monkey will not let go of the rice. And it reminds me of a lot of people. When they're offered the opportunity to change, when they look at trying to do things differently, when they're given the opportunity to change, they resist. Inspiring leaders embrace change. They're the first ones to change, and they make change happen. The last one of the companion behaviors is being a role model. There's this wonderful story when Michael Eisner was CEO of Disney, and he's giving a tour to a bunch of executives, and he's walking around the park, and he sees some garbage. Now, garbage is not his job, but Michael Eisner reaches down, picks up the garbage, and throws it in the can. Now, probably only a couple of employees saw him do that, but the next day, every employee knew he did that. When you're a role model, when you walk the talk, when you ask people to do things and you do them yourself, then you're an inspiring leader. When you do the opposite, you're an uninspiring leader. So as I've gone through these 10 behaviors, I think what you've noticed is these aren't complex, high-level skills. They're pretty common behaviors. But what we found is they're uncommonly practiced. And the key to being more inspiring is for you to get better at one of these. Now, there's two ways to think about selecting one to work on. One way to think about it is if any of these are things that you are really bad at, if you're terrible at it, that leads you to be an uninspiring leader. And so if you're bad at any one of these, if you're terrible at any one of these, I would encourage you to try and prove that. But more likely, you're not terrible at any one of these. And we found that if you can take one of these and move it from good to great, build it into that profound strength, that will make you more inspiring. Now, we've also found that people go about being inspiring in very different ways. So if you take two people, Warren Buffett and Oprah Winfrey, what we find is both of these people are inspiring, but in very different ways that they go about it. Oprah is warm and great communicator, pulls people in. Warren Buffett is analytical, smart, but when Warren Buffett buys a stock, most people buy that stock. The stock market goes up. When he sells the stock, it goes down. He has a tremendous influence over millions of people. So does Oprah. She's valued and appreciated and warm and engaging. What we found is that people go about inspiring in very different ways. And these are sort of natural ways that they go inspiring. We called these the approaches. What we did is we analyzed data from the 1,000 leaders that were most inspiring, and we found that there were 6 different ways they went about it. Now, we have a course on inspiring and motivating others. And in the course, we teach, and we actually have an assessment that helps you identify which approach you use and how you use it, and then we give you the tools to help you taking that approach that you use to become more inspiring. It's beyond the time limits of this webinar for us to give you that piece of data, but we'd love to tell you more about it and about the inspirational approaches. What we have done is given you these 10 competency companions. And again, choose one and do whatever you can to make yourself more inspiring. We have some more information in our coursework about what you can specifically do and specific actions you can take to be a more inspiring leader. So, even after all of this, I'm sure some of you are still asking the questions, well, can a leader become more inspiring? We collected data from 388 leaders in 5 different organizations. In a pre-test of their effectiveness in inspiring, they were at the 45th percentile. 18 months to 2 years later, in a post-test, they moved to the 69th percentile as a large group. They made a significant gain in their ability to inspire. We know that by utilizing these companion behaviors, we can take uninspiring leaders or barely inspiring leaders and make really inspiring leaders out of them. So I'd like to close with one poll. And you can see on the right side of your screen a little poll there, and it says, and the question is, which of these competencies do you feel is more dominant in your organization? Is it drive for results, or is it inspires and motivates others? Which of those two is more dominant? So can you log in and kind of vote for one or the other, which is more dominant in your organization? And I can see the numbers start coming in here. They're getting, whoa. Well, this isn't uninspected. You know, right now, we've got about a 90% selection of, and you guessed it, drives for results. Listen, we have emphasized it. I think it's a great behavior. Keep doing it. Keep doing A. Drive for results is important. But imagine the impact if you started to do B. Imagine the impact in your organization if more leaders were inspiring. Imagine, and I believe that training's free. I mean, I really do, because when you think of the outcomes at combining your drive for results with this inspiration, the outcome is in more productivity, lower turnover, higher customer satisfaction, all of these things, plus engagement of employees. One last story to close. It's about the Great Blondine. Now, the Great Blondine was one of the first people to walk across Niagara Falls on a rope. The rope was 1,100 feet long. It was 160 feet in the air. The first time he walked across it, he got a lot of praise and adoration, a lot of publicity about it. And because he did it once, he'd do it 3 or 4 or 5 times every summer. He kept walking across, and just walking across became boring after a while. So as you can see in this picture, one time he carries his manager over. Another time he had a little stove that he carried out onto the falls. It was actually lit. I'm not sure how he did this, but he cooked an omelet in the middle of the falls and ate it. Another time he rode a bike. Well, there was a story about the great Blondin that he's towards the last of the times that he did this, he had a wheelbarrow and he was going to push it over. And so he went to the group on the one side of the falls where he was starting, and the group was cheering and clapping, and he went up to the group and got them all excited. He says, "Do you think I can do this? Do you think I can make it across the falls?" And they were cheering, "Yes, you're the great Blondin. You can make it. You can make it. You're the great Blondin." And he noticed there was this person right in the front that was really cheering a lot. And he picked on that man personally. He said, "Sir, do you think I can make it across the falls?" "Oh, yes, you're the great Blondin. You can make it. You can make it. You are the great Blondin." Well, and then he looked at the man and he said, "Jump in the wheelbarrow." You know, as a leader, that's your job. Now, there's two ways to get people in the wheelbarrow. You can push them in, but they won't stay. The only way you can get people to stay in the wheelbarrow is to inspire them. Good luck with that. I think this is a key behavior. If you can learn to be more inspiring, you're going to be one of the best leaders in the world. So good luck with that. Love to hear your comments or questions, and get back to us with any insights you have or stories about how you've become more inspiring. We'd love to hear. Thanks so much.